Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We are committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Andrew Amigo. He is a neuroscience exercise specialist, a course developer, a creator of a revolutionary brain exercise software. He has also been active in the field of holistic health for over 20 years. Andrew Amigo, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you allowing me to be on your podcast. I'm really excited for this episode.
Well, look, I have a bunch of questions to ask you, but first, I just want to make a note that this program is sponsored by the Cellular Health Company. To visit our sponsor, go below the description wherever you find this podcast. Now, Andrew, I want to look at some terms and I want you to help us out. What is meant by neuroscience?
So basically, it's dealing with the brain and nervous system. So it's dealing with exercises that could activate pathways and improve function.
Hmm. So why would the brain need to have pathways activated?
Well, the brain is. So what we've learned in the last 30 years that the brain is pliable and plastic, which means it can change for good or for bad. So it's just like the brain is like a muscle. I mean, if you give it the brain needs three things. It needs oxygen, it needs good food, and it needs to be stimulated, exercise. During our sensory meaning our eyes, our vision, light, sound, vestibular, muscles, which they call proprioceptors, we could use different sensory exercises to activate different parts of the brain and nervous system.
Okay. The next term that I want to get clear about is, and I've seen this a lot, and I think it appears in your profile as well, holistic health. What is that?
So holistic health just means a non-drug therapeutic way of looking at the different systems. So again, we in our world, we just use exercise. Sometimes we might use some nutritional recommendations, supplements, but we use a non-drug approach, and that's your alternative holistic approach.
I see. Okay, so over the last, I don't know, maybe a couple of decades, I've been seeing the term functional added to certain professions. For example, I've seen functional medicine. So my question to you is, what does functional do when we put it as a prefix to some specialties? And I'll go into your specialty in a moment, functional neuroscience. But what does functional do to those terms?
Functional means that it's a way that different areas or systems are connected together. Let me give you an example. So one of the biggest roles of the brain is to understand where the body parts are in relationship to the other body parts and the environment. Okay, and there's a map that we have in your frontal and parietal lobe that when those areas and circuits are working, sorry about that, those areas and circuits are working properly, then when we do a test and we look at our finger to nose, right, we know that their index finger, we close our eyes, and we know that the brain knows where the index finger is relationship to the nose. Now, sometimes people think that it's up here or over here. So we know that that map is off. Well, we could give an area, an eye movement, right, where a target comes in, it disappears, that's a gap, and it reappears at a new location. That gap activates that upper brainstem. It's called your superior colliculus. And I know you're an academic because we spoke, and that you're once a professor, always a professor. So that upper brainstem, the superior colliculus, that communicates, that's the function. That communicates with the map in the frontal and parietal lobe and reorganize the map. So I have a client come in, they do a finger to nose test, and they think their tip of their nose is up here or over here by their lip. we give them that gap stimulus exercise, all of a sudden their coordination improves instantaneously. Now, sometimes that could take a little while, but in this client's case, it happened very rapidly. And that's because because I knew, one, I could give an exercise up that activates that upper brainstem, and the functional is that upper brainstem communicates with, and that's the advantage that we have, that when people work in our program, that we could get some really amazing results.
Okay, so then that brings me to functional neuroscience.
So the difference is that basically the functional applies to the brain and nervous system. When you were talking before about functional medicine, a classic example is someone comes in that's more of the neurochemistry piece. It's similar concept. So someone comes in and says, I have high cholesterol. What most of the conventional medical or the conventional approach is to give you a statin drug, right? But in functional, they look at and they say, how does your cholesterol relate in relationship to blood sugar? Why? Because if they look at your blood sugar is constantly elevated, or they have insulin resistance, which is pre-diabetic, all of a sudden they would say, okay, if we work on improving the blood sugar, how would you do that? Well, you'd look at lowering your carbohydrates, maybe taking some nutrients or supplements like alpha lipoic acid that would help the cells that when the blood glucose comes into the cell, that the cell could communicate and it could get inside the cell, and your cell sensitivity to improve the receptor cell sensitivity. And then all of a sudden you start doing that, the blood sugar comes down, cholesterol comes down. Blood sugar, cholesterol are interrelated. That's function.
Wow, that's amazing. Now let's look at your specialty, which is Neuroscience Exercise Specialist. What do you do? You've been telling us a little bit about that, but dig deeper into that for me. What do you do?
So basically, I look at different areas. I do functional tests. So what is a functional test? It's a test that's, you're not looking, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not doing an MRI. I'm basically looking at head postures. I'm looking at eye movements. I'm looking at eye movements horizontally, vertically, different types of eye movements with tracking, still targets. I'm looking at coordination. I'm looking at balance, and I'm watching people walk. And all of those functional tests, they're functional because people are doing some kind of activity, right? And all those tests look at different representations of the brain and nervous system. An example is if I track a target, so a target moves, see my finger is moving, as opposed to my eyes move the still targets. The tracking target is going to give me a window of how the temporal and the parietal area are working in the brain and the lobes. If I'm looking at more horizontal, I'm looking at the brainstem, the pons. If I look at vertical, I'm looking at your upper brainstem, mesencephalon. If I look at still targets, I'm looking at window of the frontal lobe. So again, if I'm looking at a balance test, I'm looking at more of a cerebellum function, which is in your brainstem. So the thing is, I could do functional tests. I could look to see what side and what part of the brain is. Now, that doesn't discount they always rule out and they need to see their medical doctor. But once the medical doctor gives some diagnostic, which is something I don't do, but I do looking at it from a functional perspective, then I could give specific exercises, eye movement, sound, light, vestibular, moving the limbs. We call that proprioceptive exercises that could activate certain areas that could help reorganize and get the pathways to work to improve function.
Mm-hmm. Let me make sure that I'm clear. You mentioned high cholesterol a moment ago, and also, let's say, type 2 diabetes. and you said that you're not a medical doctor, but is it possible then that your approach to health treatments could benefit someone who has high cholesterol or, let's say, type 2 diabetes?
100%. So let's give an example of someone who has autoimmune condition. So what is autoimmunity? Autoimmunity is that their own immune system is attacking they're attacking some kind of cell, right, or some kind of tissue in the body. So a classic example is rheumatoid arthritis. So it's attacking the joints, right? So the thing is that you have two approaches that we kind of look at. One approach is that one of the key links from the brain to the immune system is your vagus nerve. Why? So your digestive system, 70% of your cells, your immune cells sit behind the digestive wall. So any type of autoimmunity, you got to make sure that you're having good digestive function and you're reducing inflammation. So twofold. One is doing some sensory exercises that activate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve sits into your medullary, your brainstem, okay, and it's a key link to activate your parasympathetics. So your autonomics. What is autonomics? Digestion, heart rate, pulse, oxygen, blood pressure. These are all autonomic functions, right? So the vagus, so you have two parts, one that drive us, right, and get our heart rate increased, and that's your sympathetic, and your parasympathetic is what calms us down. So in order to digest, we have to get that parasympathetic system to work. That vagus nerve is very important. So indirectly, we could do vestibular, we could do eye movements, we could do limb movements to activate the vagus nerve. Directly, we could do gargling, we could do humming, we could do breathing, we could do, and then we could use a TENS unit on the ear, okay? Because the tragus, which is right here, that's your auricular branch of your vagus nerve. We use a very inexpensive TENS unit from Amazon, like $30 in an ear clip. So that could act, and that vagus nerve could suppress inflammation, systemic inflammation, which is really important for autoimmune conditions. It could actually improve the way your digestive system is functioning, the smooth muscles in your digestive system to move the food to the digestive tract. And then we could get you on an anti-inflammatory diet, an autoimmune paleo diet we could recommend, and we could recommend certain supplements like resveratrol, vitamin D, curcumin, fish oil, NAC-cysteine, which is a precursor to make glutathione. All of those are anti-inflammatories and support good immune health. So that doesn't mean that that goes against seeing your No, we promote seeing medical doctors and getting your diet and being under their care, but we're really good complementary therapies that could help a lot of people in those conditions. And then what we're really good at is the precision, especially with the brain exercise software, to get really precise on what part of the nervous system that we could give simple exercise. And because of the software, we can put it on their phone. And whenever you're ready to ask me a question, because I'm always so fired up to talk about our software. But that approach, the brain exercises, coupled with nutrition, coupled with recommending some supplements, can help, immensely in cases, especially with autoimmune.
Right. And that's why holistic health appears in your profile, because you're looking at a lot of different things, not just one thing. So let me go back. I've been hearing more and more today about fibromyalgia. Did I get that right? Is that something that could also be addressed by your software?
Yes. It's widespread pain. We have a program in our software. Well, one, I think in general of reducing inflammation. That's the key link to almost a lot of conditions today. And then secondly, we have our software that has a program called mirror therapy, which basically, like if the fibromyalgia is in certain limb or certain types of limbs, we could use the opposite limb. And it uses mirror neurons, and it can help severely with people who have chronic pain, phantom pain, So we use that program tremendously. We've used it also with orthopedic conditions too, where people come out of post-surgically and they're immobilized, but we get them to move their other limb and trick the brain that the circuits are moving on the limb. So meaning like if they had a left limb that had a surgery in their shoulder or a hip or left hip, we could have them doing mirror exercises in the right hip, and their brain will think that their left hip is moving. And we've seen you get the benefits of both worlds. Why? Because you're keeping the immobilization because you're not moving the injured or the surgical limb, but you're getting the circuits to fire. We use it also in strokes, the mirror therapy. I mean, we've seen people that have problems dorsiflexing, bringing their ankle up or their hip up, and we've used the mirror where they'll use the opposite limb. Though you say it's the stroke affected the left limb, the left leg or left foot, we'll have them do exercises on the right, and that seems to really help a lot.
Interesting. So is pain in the body, or in the spine, or is pain?
The conscious perception of pain is in your parietal lobe. So what happens is there's a pain pathway. So just say an example is I hit my hand, or I hit my shoulder. So I hit my shoulder. You have pain receptors that are inhibited naturally, and they're around the local area. And all of a sudden I have an injury. Those pain receptors, a signal gets activated, and that goes right from those receptors into the level of the spine. So if my shoulder, it's C5, C6. So it goes into the spinal cord, and then it crosses over to the other side. And then the next message goes from the spinal cord up into the brainstem. So it goes into the medullary, it goes to the pons, and then it goes into the mesencephalon. And then from there, it travels up to the thalamus, which is a relay area where all information goes before it hits the cortex, except for smell. And then from the thalamus, it goes into the parietal lobe for the conscious perception of pain. So the thing is that we have descending inhibitory pain pathways that we can activate using eye movements, using we can use even sound to activate your parasympathetic system. So there's a lot of different mechanisms that we can knock the pain out using sensory exercise. But the conscious perception of pain hits the parietal lobe, where we actually, as humans, perceive that we have some kind of pain, how it feels, and where the pain is located.
Okay, but there's this connection between the spine and the brain, which is
yes.
What if a person's spine has been
like a spinal cord injury? Yeah, that's a tough injury. Again, the spine is very important because it's the link between the brain and your limbs. So the thing is, if there is a spinal cord injury, that could really that could make the rehab a lot more challenging.
Okay, but not impossible. This is
not impossible, but it's making it a lot more. Spinal cord injuries are really challenging. I think that what they're doing with stem cells, I think that's hopefully down the road they'll perfect. It'll be more promising, and to create new cells for the damaged ones. And then I think some of the things they're doing with the BMI, the brain machine interfaces, I'm interested to see how that can help, because those are very, very spinal cord injuries are very challenging, because again, the messages have to flow from the limbs all the way up to the brain and brain back down to the limb, and the spinal cord is your interface that allows that to happen.
I see. Now, I'm certain that you've worked with people who've had a variety of neurological disorders. Can you just mention some of them for me?
Yeah, so I've worked with people who have had concussions, traumatic brain injuries, strokes, Parkinson's, movement disorders, balance disorders, people who have chronic pain, phantom pain. Phantom pain is basically like somebody who had a limb that they say someone had a viral infection and they had to cut one of their limbs off, or they had, it's common in the military that an explosion goes off and they lose one of their limbs and they don't have a limb, but yet they still have pain there. That's called phantom pain. And that map in the parietal, that your sensory and the motor map in the parietal and frontal lobe that's affected. And we could really help a lot of those cases. I've also worked with kids on the autistic spectrum, kids with special needs, and autoimmune conditions. So I've worked with a wide variety of types of cases. And now obviously I've developed the software, my brain exercise software, that we're working with clinics to use the software.
Yeah, you mentioned children. I had a call actually from a mother some time ago, and she was asking me if I knew of anyone who worked with children or anything that could help children who have ADHD.
That's right up our alley.
It is up your alley. I'm going to try to locate her. So tell me, how would that work? How would this help a kid?
Yeah. So
let me change that to say anyone, actually, because there's some adults who still deal with ADHD as well. So.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with kids with ADHD is they're part of their frontal lobe. So their upper brainstem, called mesencephalon, fires really fast. Right. So the circuits are going really fast. And a part of their brain, their most lateral part of their frontal lobe, right, which is really important, that makes the human in us, that separates the lateral part of our brain, separates us from the beast in the field, right? That makes us more humanistic, that makes us executive decision making, attention, focus, short-term memory. Those are all things that lateral part, especially as a part of the brain called your dorsolateral, the prefrontal cortex. And we can activate that in several different ways. One, using eye movements that you go to opposite. So meaning that if you look at a target and you have two shapes, and a target, you're looking in the middle, right? And a target comes in here, your eyes have to look opposite. Now, why is that important? Because when your eye is going to want to move towards the target, what happens is, to inhibit that process, you have to fire the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. So that's one way that we can do it. The other thing that the dorsolateral, the prefrontal cortex, does is it fires to a sublayer of the brain. There's a sublayer of the brain called their basal ganglia, and it's an influencer. It influences people with cognition, eye movements, motor movements for the muscles, right? And your emotional brain, your limbic system. So that's where your behavioral brain is, right?
Yeah.
And there are two pathways. They have to fire at a really the same rate. One excites and influences and excites, and one calms us down. And the pathway that calms us down usually is not firing at the appropriate rate. So the one that's influencing us to drive and move and shake and all over the place is what is firing at a greater rate. Well, those anti-saccades could fire that inhibitory pathway. That's another thing that helps with these kids, is to get them to move their limbs in different facets, especially multiplanar activities. So multiplanar activities really help drive your cerebellum. That's your coordination part of the brain. A lot of times you'll see those kids that aren't that as coordinated as they could be. You could see, like, if they move, you could see that they'll slip or fall, or they're just, as what we call, clumsy, right? But if you move their limbs in certain patterns, especially multiplanar activity, and we can do that all with our software. Yeah. And we could do that remotely. So our software, you could be anywhere because we're in the cloud. And then we can move the data to the phone, and we could be anywhere to work with the client.
That's great. Look, I know there are no guarantees. I'm still going to deal with ADHD for a moment. On a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you that a kid who is suffering from ADHD could be helped by?
I think about 80+%. It's hard. I would never like to give 100%, because I think that's an ego mindset. And I think the combination of what I've seen is, if a client, or especially a parent, gives length of time So meaning that, they're not, they're not saying like in 1 month their kid's going to get but if they give a program the length of time and they're consistent with doing the program on the session, in addition to that, with being able to do it, because the key for our program is the carryover. Our software, we've made it so simplistic. So we've had the depth and all the tools to get really precise with the programs, but really simple to the client. In this case, if a parent is doing it with their kid, really simple. The biggest thing we need is the length of time and the consistency of doing the program. And we probably get a real good shot. I say an 80+%, because again, I don't like to come with an ego mindset. So I'm really humble, but we've seen some really good results.
Right. So you mentioned strokes earlier as well. So what have you seen in terms of individuals who have had a stroke and are attempting to come back, to bounce back?
We've seen some really good with the mirror therapy. We're doing reflex movements. So there's some reflex eye movements that we've been using to improve limb activation. Also, certain eye movements activate the supplementary motor association area, which is for fine detailed movements. So we've seen some really good to help the dexterity in the hands and the feet. So we've seen some really good speech. We've seen some really good, some really good outcomes with those as well.
Parkinson's, that's a pretty tough one, isn't it? So
it depends on, Parkinson's is a progressive. So again, to let people know, Parkinson's is a progressive disease that you're not curing. The key is, can you slow down the progression? And it just depends on the variant of the Parkinson's. If it's Parkinson's, if it's just Parkinson's, we've seen like their progression, they have a better chance to slow it down. If they have, like, I've worked with some really challenging cases that you could slow down, but eventually the prognosis isn't going to be great because it's such a progressive disease. Parkinson's MSA, very challenging, but I've worked with those cases. And then Parkinson's PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy. Usually people with those cases at the PSP, at some point they are going to probably pass, just how long. But the regular Parkinson's, they could live for a while with that. And then again, you're trying to improve their quality of life. You're trying to slow down the progression. I mean, those are the things you're trying to do. And how do you do that? With, again, precise, sensory stimulation, again, through our software that we use, and nutrition. But if you're going to tell someone you're going to cure, that wouldn't be a really good thing to say, because it's a progressive disease. And then the Parkinson's MSAs are hard as well. So it depends on the variant of the Parkinson's disease.
Understood. I know your software has been used by athletes. What have you been seeing in terms of what they presented and how have they benefited?
I've seen it. So I've had a case I'm working with now, the concussion, and it's been pretty good. I mean, we've seen improvements in balance. We've seen improvements in reaction time. We actually, in our ninth program, we just put in maybe a month or so ago reaction time training program. So we've seen some really good results with improving reaction time, improving vision. I mean, to go back to the strokes, I had a client that had they had an occlusion in the retinal artery, which basically they lost central vision in the left eye, and the prognosis was not good. But we've improved. She couldn't drive. We've worked for a while with this case. She was very consistent. She gave the program length of time, and outcomes were incredible. Probably improved her vision by over 80%. She's driving now. The ophthalmologist thought that there's a group of nerves. So anytime you have a group of nerves together, they call them a ganglion. So they had a retinal ganglion. What he thought was the software was whatever was still viable, whatever so we work on a receptor-based system. So basically, that's how the nervous system communicates. We have different receptors. Muscles have receptors called proprioceptors. So in the vision, we have photoreceptors. And what he thought was that the receptors, whatever receptors were still left, through the software, we were able to strengthen those so well that they compensated for the ones that would just die, the cells and the receptors had died.
Mhm.
So it's funny because at that time, the ophthalmologist was hoping that maybe was not hoping for MS, but in this case, because with MS, which is an autoimmune condition, the vision would come back. But when they saw it was she had an artery that was, she had an occlusion, and that she lost essential vision. He didn't think the prognosis, now because he didn't know of my software, and then that she was recommended by her son, who was a client of mine. And after seeing such improvements, and the other thing we saw was the pressure in her eye she lost through doing all the work, because what we thought also was the software was just improving blood flow to the area. She probably decreased in a good way 5 points in each eye on her pressure in her eye. So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. You mentioned MS, multiple sclerosis, and I'm going to also add muscular dystrophy. It appears to me that those two conditions are challenging for the medical establishment. If I'm correct, why do you suppose that is? And do you think your tool could help in that?
Well, I think like to go back to MS is an autoimmune condition, right? And to go back to like your rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, you're not curing these conditions, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the brain, the nervous system, the autonomics, and the gut and the digestive system in the best position it could be. And if you could do that, so how do you do that? One is precise stimulation, meaning very precise brain exercise program, right? Helping the brain itself, helping the autonomics, activating the vagus nerve. So now we're suppressing inflammation from a stimulation point where we're improving digestive immune function, and then supporting that with really good anti-inflammatory diet. So a lot of times a paleo type diet, getting them off whatever food that they react to, supporting the immune system with vitamin D, curcumin, fish oil, resveratrol, and NLC-cysteine, which is a precursor to make glutathione. So those 5 really key things help reduce inflammation and support the immune cell function, right? So then your goal, your hope is if you can, put the brain, the autonomics, the vagus nerve, the digestive immune system in the best position, you're hoping that sometimes could you potentially be in remission, right? Okay. And if you could do that, but if you tell somebody that you're going to cure someone from autoimmunity like Parkinson's, that's just unrealistic expectations.
Right.
But we've seen, depending, and then the other thing you got to look at is if you don't put it in remission, the question is, did you improve? Did you slow down the progression? Did you improve the quality of life? Yeah. And if you did that, then it's successful.
That is successful. To slow down the progression and improve quality of life is a win in my book.
Yes.
I want to look more closely at your tools. We've been talking about it, but I want to dig a little deeper. And if I get some of the language off, just help me out here. First, the accomplished brain software. Did I see that right in your profile?
Yes. Yes.
So what is that?
So the accomplished brain software is a revolutionary brain exercise software. We have 9 brain exercise programs. So some of the programs have multiple brain activities. So we have 9 programs. We have a breathing program. We have we have 4 virtual reality programs. 2 of them are augmented reality. I'll explain. So virtual reality is you're in a room. So 9 programs, over 30 brain activities, 4 virtual reality programs. 2 of them are augmented reality. So what is augmented reality? It's just a camera that lays over the regular environment. So when we use like mirror therapy, we use the camera. We're seeing the regular environment and we flip the image. So we have another program, a sensory program called Reactor, that has coordination, rhythm, and timing, which is metronome. So rhythm and timing, these kids with ADHD, they respond really, really good to temporal lobe. So frontal lobe, dorsolateral, prefrontal cortex, and their temporal lobe with rhythm and timing. So they respond really, really well to that. So we have a program called Reactor that has 6 parts. We have coordination, which they respond well, rhythm and timing, reaction time, memory, which we basically completed, and now we're working on the development of the last 2 parts, auditory processing, which was another good program, and we're about 80% finished with that, and movements, special movements for Parkinson's, called LSVT and rock steady boxing. So basically, we have different images, so you can see the regular environment, use the camera. Virtual reality is you're in a room. So we have 2 of those. We have a virtual reality vestibular program that basically we take automated vestibular device, which is a $250,000 device called a gyrostim, and we replicated that type of therapy for a fraction of the cost in virtual reality. We have an eye movement program in that's a virtual reality that has 7 parts to it. We have a 2D, another eye program that's 2D that's just on the phone. We have a sound program that we use for hearing, balance, and anxiety. We have an evaluation tool that we can measure. So we take the phone and we turn it into a gyroscope and we can measure someone's balance, and that all that data goes back to our cloud. So we have and then we have the virtual reality, the augmented reality mirror therapy program, and then we have a modulator which we use of different pictures of body parts. We have 583 pictures, 6 body parts: the hand, the shoulder, the foot, the knee, the neck, and the back. And we use that to modulate that map so the brain knows where its body parts are in space in relationship to the different body parts and the dyslexia. So we use, because we have discrimination of a body part, is a limb a left limb or right limb. So the same area that causes pain also can cause people to have dyslexia. So we use it for phantom pain, chronic pain, and dyslexia. So we have 6 body parts, 4 levels of pictures, 583 pictures. We have the app that's on Apple and Android, and then we have we have a dashboard that sits in the cloud. And practitioners, I'm the owner, but I'm also a practitioner. We lease this to different clinics as well. And basically, the practitioners move the data from the dashboard, sits in Oracle's cloud, runs on Postgres SQL database, and all the client does is log in and press play. So it took us, and I'll share this. My wife is a speech language pathologist. She's a wonderful, very special lady. She's been here about 15 years with my stepdaughter. My stepdaughter is going to be a physical therapist, and my wife is a speech language pathologist. And through my wife, I was able to sync up with some amazing developers in Colombia, the country. So and through them and myself, I conceptually designed, and then they did all the work. Daniel does all our brain programs, and John does all the development for our dashboard.
Wow. Well, the brain is a powerful instrument, isn't it? And
yes,
I saw something on social media within the last couple of months, and you brings to mind because you talk about movement, eye movement, things like that. But in the information, it said to move your hand, and I don't remember exactly which direction, and then move your right foot in the opposite direction. And once you did that, it switched. That is, and I tried it several times. But when I started moving my hand, it switched the way I was moving my foot. Does that make sense?
They do that. They call that a figure 8. So what happens is the cerebellum works on like a multiplanar to improve. So the cerebellum is, if I have my phone here and I want to pick my phone up, my right hand, the left brain is sending the signal to all the muscles. but there's no intelligence of how these muscles work together. So left brain sends the signal. So the right side muscles in my hand and my shoulder pick the phone up, but they have to work together. And that's where the right side, so the left brain sends a signal, the right cerebellum coordinates all the movement together. Cerebellum is so important. What improves the cerebellum on that side is multiplanar activity. To do that with the arm and the leg, you can move a multiplanar one way, like your arm one way and your foot the other way, and that will help cerebellum function. So that's probably what was going. That was probably what was happening.
Yeah, it happened. It worked, and I saw other people do it as well. Let me ask you this: can, let's say, an athlete, a football player, can a wide receiver improve his ability to catch a ball by using some of the principles that you're sharing now?
Yes, 100%, 100%. Because they, first of all, their attention, their focus, their vision. You got to realize a lot of the vision, and I'm not, and I wouldn't. That does not like discount going and looking at, true, visual disorders with of how the light is coming into your eyes. So that doesn't mean that you not need glasses, but a concept just in neuroscience is that a target has to get on the fovea of your retina. So the fovea, why is that? Because most of your photoreceptors to see are near the fovea of the retina. So important is to get a gaze. So we could do exercise in your vestibular system that could help you to see a target. We could also do eye movements like saccades, I call them, where your eyes have to move to a new gaze and fixate. So these are all things that could help dynamically, and then especially when you're going to catch a ball. So and then obviously connecting the eye with the hand and eye coordination, and we can help with that.
That's fascinating. I know that you're the creator of the brain exercise software. Can you take us deeper into what that is and how it's useful to people today?
Yeah, so people come in with all sorts of, like concussions, traumatic brain injury, strokes, and I felt like my vision was that how do we improve, and my passion is how do we improve better outcomes for clients, right? And how do we provide maybe and I say this complimentary because I think like a lot of the physical therapists, the chiropractors, the occupational therapists, the neuro optometrists, the athletic trainers, they're already doing great work, right? So my mind was, is it possible that we could take things that are really complex with the brain and put it in a much easier fashion and a little more simplified fashion, and add that as a complementary service to what there are already great work that they're already doing. So my mind was, and also what my mind was is, if I think reverse engineer of how to give to the client and reverse back. What do I mean by that? A lot of people who create things, they think about, well, I'm going to send this to the practitioner, and it doesn't matter the cost because it's great, and I'm going to give it to the practitioner. Gets this, then he buys this, then he buys this, and all of a sudden he can't afford everything, right? So then, or they're spending this, and how does the client? Then the client has to suffer. Like an example is the GyroStim is a great device, but it's $250,000. So whatever clinic has it, going to have to make their money back off of it. So we thought, is it possible that we could look at what would be great for the client, but we're going to make things for the practitioner we're going to make for the client through the practitioner, and make one software, many tools, cost effective, and really get great results. And what would that be? And that's where I thought of these 9 programs and over 30 brain activities. And then the unbelievable thing is that we use a very inexpensive virtual reality headset for like $30. Why? Because we move the data right to the client's phone. And because we're able to move the data to the client's phone, most people have smartphones, an Apple or an Android, which means they have a processor and a camera. So all they need is a viewable phone. Why? Viewable VR headset. Because the key for us is in not only doing it in a session, which could be a telepractice session in the clinic, right? But most importantly, they could do it at home after their session's over. Really simple. When all they got to do is log in and press play. So because we're able to do all of that, we're able to provide, really cost effective at a fraction of the cost. And that we're looking through the practitioners because we want to impact these practitioners so they could further get better outcomes as a complimentary service so they could help improve the outcomes of their clients. And if we could do all of that, we build a great business.
That's fantastic. So if I forget this, is that the end users could include athletic trainers, chiropractors, other health professionals.
So basically our market that we market our software to is physical therapists. There's there's two groups in the physical therapy world that work with brain cases. They're what they call the NCSs. They take a separate sub-study. They're called Neurological Clinical Specialists, NCS. Some of them do NCS and vestibular rehab. Vestibular is your inner ear. Some are just vestibular, some are vestibular and NCS. Your occupational therapist, because they deal with neuro cases. Your chiropractor. In the chiropractic world, there's a distinct group that is excellent called your functional neurologist. Your neuro-optometrist, because they're optometrists that are looking more at the neuro and the nervous system. And then I'm trying to get more of the athletic trainers because especially at the high school and college level, they're dealing with concussions. So those are kind of like medical doctors, but medical doctors aren't doing as much treatment as suppose. And when they're doing treatment, it's more surgery and medications. Yeah. But yeah, I'm interested in talking to them because they're very important in the whole realm and scheme of things.
That's fantastic. We've touched upon some success stories, but before we leave today, could you just share a couple of other success stories where clients have actually used your software and made improvement?
Yeah, we've had a client that had a balance disorder, and she went to several clinics, and again, we're not better or worse. We just looked at a little bit of a different approach, looking and using the software, and this was a case that I was helping one of the clinics that was leasing my software, and she had a lot of trouble with her, walking. She thought she'd fall. This was going on for quite a while, and over the past maybe a couple of months, she started using the software, and then we started her in the clinic, and then after a while of seeing what we thought worked, we had her order the virtual reality headset. We moved the data right onto her phone, and she's been consistently doing it once a day and just amazing results. Now she could walk, she could turn, she could spin. Just really, really super successful. Wow. So that was a case that was really fantastic. I've worked with several kids who were on the autistic spectrum. And again, using multiplanar activities, we were able to see like improvements in their walking. One client had like scissor gait where they would walk where their legs would cross each other. Yeah. And a lot of times they had toe walking. So they walked on their toes, and being able to use our virtual reality vestibular program, we use the visual system to perceive that, like, to activate these ear canals. And we could get the thing about our software is because we could get so precise with the reps, with colors of targets, how fast the targets are, so the speed, the reps, the set, we could get so precise with that kind of information that we could see exactly what's going to work. Because I really believe that customization is really, and the precision of the program is really important. So meaning that, there are similarities to each program, but some program is going to be changed a little bit differently for each client. And also the way we have a client now that we're working with that has what they call floaters, so a visual problem, and she's had it for a long time. And a lot of times the nervous system is very delicate, so it's like a chess game. It can fatigue really fast. So the key is, where do you get? And here's where functional comes in. You give a Here's the problem. You give the exercise here. Sometimes you could go right at the area, but sometimes you might go to another area because these two areas communicate. So the time that this guy gets the actual activation, it's at a less rate. It's huge component in brain rehab, huge component. And what happens is we find that we do little tricks. We might give an exercise, and then we give an exercise to cool them off. An exercise, and then we give an exercise, and we might do that several with a lot of the different clients, and that can make huge differences. And so it's a lot of, I don't think anything we do is what they haven't seen. I think the software is unique because it brings all these tools together, and then the uniqueness is the program design. And we're able to find a very specific program. And when people understand that, it's all the software is able to give the precision, and then the program, like we changed the program, like we gave like a client a stimulation. We gave them 2 different eye programs and 2 different eye movements for the ocular floater. And then we give one eye program, cool her off. Then we gave her another eye program, cooled her off. And that pattern has worked out like tremendously.
Wow. Look, I have a curiosity question, and I'm not certain if you can answer these, but I'm just curious. Are health conditions such as obesity, and on the other extreme, anorexia, in the brain or in the kitchen?
I think a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of both. So I think because I think that the question is, there's a conscious mind of why you're reaching for the food in the first place, right? And then there's conscious in your emotional limbic system. So I think it's somewhat of, we could stimulate, and then I think there's a higher level of healing that comes to your, which is not work, which is work that I try to do on myself to give good energy. But there's an energy coaching therapy of what your thoughts are. So again, I think it's a combination of 3 things. I think it's a huge thing is your energy. So if you find like life coaching, that would be like huge, because it's what's going on in your thoughts up here. And then I think, yes, could be some things we could do with the exercise and stimulation. And then I think also what you are putting into your mouth, or in anorexia, what you're putting in, and then obviously you're throwing it out. So I think it's like 3 levels.
Yeah, understood. Well, this is fascinating. How did you get into this fascinating area of work?
So when I first started in the industry, I've been over 20 years. I started out in sports injuries, right? Because I enjoyed sports, and what I was finding was, I was looking for, after being in the industry a little while, I was looking for a niche, because part of the challenge that I had was, being an athlete, we had to be so disciplined and committed. And what I saw was that your sports injuries, some were, if you got an athlete, and some regular people would be very committed, but sometimes some people wouldn't. But I saw that, so I've always liked the work itself, like enjoyed the process of the work. And what I saw was that the niche was the brain, and in the brain, the cases were severe, that and affected their function, that most people were because their function was affected, that they're more than likely they had to take their condition a little more seriously and more focus and dedication. And I think that was where I wanted to be. Because I think when you're working with a client, I think there's some, you're connecting, hey, how's this going? How's your day going? You might have a joke here, but you're really, we're here to help, and we're here to improve your quality of life. The time that you come and focus to us, because we want your quality of life to be improved. And I thought that the brain was really interesting. It was something 15 years ago I didn't know that much about, but now I've learned tremendous amount over the last 15 years. To that, I developed my own course. I developed the software. I've worked with really complex cases, but I felt that was the niche I was looking for. That was that the case helped, the client become a little more focused and committed, and also it was more of a strategy. The brain is complex, and it's delicate, and it can make a change quickly good or quickly bad, really fast. Right, so it can make a good change of it. So just understanding the strategy of working in those cases was really interesting for me.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, I enjoyed our time together today. So thank you for being on the show.
And thank you, Stephen. I appreciate the opportunity to get on your show and to share, what we've been doing at the Accomplished Brain and the Accomplished Brain software.
Fantastic. Well, you've been listening to or watching the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Andrew Amigo, a neuroscience exercise specialist. I'm Stephen Middleton, with a reminder to check out our sponsor at the bottom of the description wherever you see this podcast. Until next time, good day.